quick show of hands. How many people? Okay, Mark, you're on. Mark, actually, you would be someone who would answer this question by raising your hand. How many people in this room, either as a child or an adult, have or will read from the Torah portion Yitro? Hint, hint, it's got the Ten Commandments in it in Exodus. So if you have or will read from Yitro, any point in your life, raise your hands. Okay, all of the current adult b'nai mitzvah need to raise their hands, and everyone else, or if you've read it in any other context. Okay, so there are a lot of people in this room. Yeah, someone else back there too who wants to. Okay, so you're in good company. There are 17 adults back behind you, Brandon and Benjamin, who will read Torah on June 11th on Shavuot when we read Yitro again, and they're having a Shabbat dinner tonight, so their whole class is here. They've only been learning Hebrew for a year, so you have to be super kind because it's a lot harder for them, but they're doing great. Even though they may not think it, they're doing great, right? Betty Hainsford is their teacher. So this week is a big week in Torah. I mean, I guess every week is But we read from Yitro. Among the highlights of Yitro is one of the two versions in Torah of the Ten Commandments. A little Ten Commandment trivia. I know you're all super excited. This is what rabbis geek out on. Maybe cantors too, probably, right? Ten Commandment trivia. In Hebrew, by the way, they're called Aseret HaDibrot, or the 10 words. 10 Commandments, as I mentioned, appear twice in Torah. Once in Exodus and once, anyone know? No, but that's a good guess. Deuteronomy. Leviticus has the holiness code, which is kind of similar. So you were like warm there. They're pretty almost identical. One of the notable differences is the commandment for Shabbat. In Exodus, it says Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, remember the Sabbath. And in Deuteronomy, it says keep the Sabbath, or Shamor. The Ten Commandments, as we know, are important not just to Jews. They're part of our shared Jewish-Christian tradition. And while many believe that only 10 commandments were revealed at Mount Sinai, Jewish tradition actually teaches that the entire Torah was revealed, even though these 10 are highlighted. So that 10 became a metaphor for the entire Torah. The first 5 have to do with God and people, and the second 5 have to do with commandments between people, like people and people to people. And the 10 commandments are read 3 times during the year. This Shabbat, Shabbat Yitro, Shabbat Ve'etchanan, when Deuteronomy 5 and 6, the Torah portion of Ve'etchanan is read, and adult b'nai mitzvah class on Shavuot. And did you know that the 10 commandments used to be part of our liturgy? They were used to be read right before the Shema. So this is where I find it super fascinating. Until about, maybe 1,800 years ago, the 10 commandments were actually read in the morning liturgy. As early as the 1st century CE, they were included in the liturgy, and the Talmud and a guy named Philo talked about them as the essence of the entire Torah, like they were representative of the whole Torah. 500 years later, a really famous rabbi named Sadia Gaon, or Sadia the genius, wrote liturgical hymns or songs for Shavuot in which he took all of the commandments of the Torah, all 613, and he distributed them under the headings of each of the 10. So he tried to make like 10 categories. Keep in mind, he did this without a computer, without AI, without giant Post-its to like make his categories. He did it on his desk, presumably, with pen and ink. In other words, these rabbis tried to categorize, make meaning, and find understanding and lift up the importance of the 10 commandments and show the connection between those 10 and the other, which is why, Deborah, when you said Leviticus 19 or Kedoshim, they made those connections too. And so through each morning in the Second Temple period, they read the 10 commandments and then the Shema, which, as you know, is also from Torah. And this is recorded in something really cool called the Nash Papyrus, the oldest piece of Jewish text, even older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the Dead Sea Scrolls also include these texts, and it just assumed that the 10 commandments were in the liturgy, were in the prayers. The Mishnah in the 3rd century does the same thing. And they said that the priests in the temple in Jerusalem actually read the 10 commandments part of the Amidah, which we just chanted tonight, right? Baruch atah Adonai. I don't think they use that melody, but you know. And they also included the priestly benediction, which you've all heard. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine on you and be gracious unto you. May God's face lift upon you and grant you peace. And a midrash even says that maybe the Ten Commandments were included in some tefillin years ago, but not now. But in case you didn't notice, they're no longer in our liturgy. Why? We don't read the Ten Commandments daily. We do, though, read two other passages from Torah in our daily liturgy. One is Shema. What's the other one? We just sung it, and it was a big deal last week. Micha Mocha, right? The Song of the Sea and Shema are also from Torah. So the Ten Commandments have been out of our liturgy for about 1,800 years. Why? The Talmuds, both Talmuds, the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, Babylonian and the Palestinian Talmuds, say, and I quote, paraphrase, that they took out the Ten Commandments because of murmuring heretics. It's a great phrase, right? Murmuring heretics. They were worried, the rabbis were worried that other people who weren't the Jewish people or mainstream Jewish people would think that those were our only 10. Who were those heretics? Again, no aspersions to be cast on anyone today or anyone in the room, but this is back a lot of years, a lot of centuries. Those heretics were early Christians, Gnostics, Samaritans, even some Jews at the time. Whomever they were, and they weren't totally named, they were called heretics. So basically people who the rabbis thought didn't believe in the God that the rabbis believed in. The rabbis were really nervous that either they would think that we only had 10 commandments from Mount Sinai, or that the rest of the Torah wasn't legitimate. Maimonides says centuries later that maybe it's also because they didn't want the other people to think that we, the Jews, had priorities, like my commandment's better than your commandment. The truth is, some of them do, but anyway. So the Ten Commandments were removed from the liturgy by and large, though the rabbis had lots of conversations, really fascinating ones actually. And some even tried to put them back in the liturgy to restore it to the practice that had been. But the consensus was, yeah, you can say the Ten Commandments in private, but don't do it in public. You might cause problems. So where are we today? The Ten Commandments are read, as I mentioned, 3 times a year in public, on Shabbat Yitro, Shabbat Ve'etchanan, and Shavuot. And this is Shabbat Yitro. So think about it. What's our relationship with the Ten Commandments today? Interestingly, I think that actually what's happened is we have set them apart. How many of us have said, well, the Ten Commandments, right? Like we set them apart as different. When in fact, how many other commandments in Torah are amazing, are powerful, are important? Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't keep the wages of someone who works for you overnight. Make sure you provide for the needs of the poor. Honor your parents are in that also. Children, be respectful of parents. Celebrate holidays. And then so many more. So I don't know. Are they really the most important, or do we maybe still treat them that, even though the rabbis were trying against that? Certainly not, in my eyes, the most comprehensive, but maybe if we do what Saja did and we list all the other ones under those categories. So I'm going to take read to you the list briefly. I won't read every part of every commandment. A few of them are long. And I invite you to listen to the Ten Commandments with fresh ears and think about, I won't ask you to answer this, but think about, if you were going to hold 10 commandments today, would you keep the same list? And if not, what would you add? What would you subtract? If you want to talk more about that, we'll have a conversation tomorrow morning in this room, Shabbat morning, 9:30. But right now, just listen and think about what rings important for you and what might you change. We read in Torah that God spoke all these words, saying, number 1, I, Adonai, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any likeness of what is in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. You shall not swear falsely by the name of your God, Adonai. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of your God, Adonai. You shall not do any work. Honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure on the land that your God, Adonai, is assigning to you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not cover your neighbor's wife or male or female slave or ox or donkey or anything that is your neighbor's. So you don't have to remember those. When you leave the sanctuary this evening, our ushers, thank you, Mark and Margot, have copies of the 10 Commandments you can take with you. And I invite you to think about this. If you were choosing 10 rules to live by, or 10 rules, think about 10 rules that you do live by. Because whether we call them rules or mitzvot or just the things I do because I do them, or things that make me good people, or who knows, we all have things that we do that we think are the right things to do. I invite you to think about, what are the rules that you live by? What are the rules you want to live by? Don't have to be 10, by the way. And I invite you to look at the list of the 10 and see what that challenges, inspires you to do. I did a little not scientific social media request this week, and I got a few additions for people. I was told we should add a mitzvah about kindness. We should add a mitzvah that says, thou shalt honor the earth. There are actually a lot of mitzvot in Torah about protecting the environment. We should have a mitzvah, a commandment that says, respect diversity and embrace unity. And my own personal favorite is seek peace and pursue it. So this Shabbat, I invite you to spend a little time, take a little quiet time, and take this request seriously. Think about the rules that guide you. What are your foundation? Are they the rules your parents or grandparents told you? Are they part of the 10 Commandments? What do you feel obligated to do, committed to do? And take a copy of the 10 Commandments home. Look at it. Interpret it for yourself. What do they mean? And what, if anything, would you add, would you remove, would you change? And then get in conversation with someone, a sibling, a spouse, a friend, a child, a neighbor. Say, ask them, what are the rules that guide them? And then take this piece of paper or your own piece of paper or that note on your phone and carry it with you. Perhaps start reading the 10 Commandments, these 10 Commandments or your own, each day for yourself. Not publicly, but privately. No, I'm kidding. But think about the rules that guide you. I mean, we all go forward with a sense of commitment to the mitzvot of our tradition and the other mitzvot that we bring to our tradition. Shabbat Shalom.